The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. Liar's Kingdom. That's Andrew Weissman's new book. It's my favorite new book. It's also very short, so you can read it very quickly. It is How to Stop Trump's Deceit and Save America. And this is what I call just in time. This is exactly what we need from a former federal prosecutor who knows an awful lot about the way the Justice Department is supposed to work. We're going to hear from him about the day's events, obviously, which were in some ways anticipated in this book. And he's got some fascinating solutions about what can be done going forward from here. So Andrew's going to join us on that.
I have that book sitting on my bedside table. We're going to talk to him later this week. Doing a book interview with Lawrence O'Donnell is also the way to go, always. So I can't wait to hear what you guys talk about. And he's probably one of the best lawyers out there on TV. Explains everything in real term ways. So look forward to watching it.
He's just the best. We just did one of those big 92nd Street Y events in New York, and a packed house for Andrew Weissman, hanging on every word in that audience. The book, again, Liar's Kingdom, Andrew Weissman. Get it right now. It's just a great one.
It's a good one. I'm going to go read it. It's on sale now, right?
Okay.
People can go buy it? Good. All right.
Get it right now. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, the trick question for most politicians, and especially now for Republican politicians, is what would you not do to get reelected? And sadly, most politicians don't have an answer to that question. In fact, they don't even understand the question because they would do anything. They would say anything. And that is certainly true of Trump-supporting Republicans who used to be opposed to tariffs, but now support Donald Trump's tariffs, even though they are illegal and unconstitutional. That is true of Republicans who used to support serious prison sentences for people convicted of violent crime, but now support Trump pardons and Trump cash for every violent criminal who attacked the Capitol on January 6th to try to overturn a presidential election for Donald Trump, including many of them whose publicly declared intent in the attack at the time was to assassinate the Vice President of the United States, to hang Mike Pence. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie found something that he would not do to get reelected. He would not try to help Donald Trump keep the Epstein files hidden inside the Trump Justice Department. And so Thomas Massie lost his reelection campaign tonight in Kentucky by 10 points in a Republican primary where Donald Trump supported Thomas Massie's opponent only because Thomas Massie, along with Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, did everything he possibly could do to successfully force the release of the Epstein files by law. That was his crime against Donald Trump. And 45% of Republicans in Thomas Massie's district sided with Thomas Massie in that election against Donald Trump. Thomas Massie knew that trying to get the Epstein files released would provoke vengeance from Donald Trump. Thomas Massie, like every other Republican member of the House and Senate, had every right to believe that most of his voters are still in the grip of Donald Trump. But helping Donald Trump hide the Epstein files was something that Thomas Massie just could not do, even though he knew that crossing Donald Trump could lose his reelection. We don't see this very often in our politics anymore. A politician knowingly taking the chance of defeat in reelection because there's something that he just could not do. In this case, something he couldn't do for Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is testing Republicans in the House and Senate once again by creating what Senator Ron Wyden calls, quote, the most brazen theft and abuse of taxpayer dollars by any president in American history. And today, Donald Trump's acting attorney general refused to promise that none of the money that the Attorney General will award to secret recipients of a new secret fund that Donald Trump's Treasury will supply to Donald Trump's Justice Department will go to Andrew Paul Johnson. Donald Trump's acting Attorney General, who is Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, was asked if he would give money to Andrew Paul Johnson today, and he refused to answer. Donald Trump pardoned Andrew Paul Johnson and let him out of prison, where he was serving time for his violent participation in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And Andrew Paul Johnson, as soon as he got out of prison, publicly thanked Donald Trump and then immediately went back to sexually abusing children. Andrew Paul Johnson abused two children, a boy and a girl, aged 10 and 11, before he went to prison for his crimes on January 6th. And then he immediately went back to sexually abusing those same two children again as soon as Donald Trump let him out of prison. And now Andrew Paul Johnson has been sentenced to life in prison after a Florida jury found him guilty of 5 criminal charges, including molestation, lewd and lascivious exhibition, and transmission of material harmful to a minor. And today, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's acting Attorney General, said, in effect, it's possible that Andrew Paul Johnson will now get money from Donald Trump's secret fund as a reward for attacking the Capitol on January 6th.
Let me go back to this slush fund, because there's also an individual who, after being pardoned by the president, went on to molest 2 children. And that person actually tried to buy the silence of these children by saying that he would pay them some of the funds that he was hoping to get from your slush fund. Can you commit to making the rules so that that person is not eligible for a payout under this fund?
Well, you're obviously lying in your question, because there's no way that this person committed to that. Because the slush fund, as you call it, which is not, didn't exist.
I'm sure,
but I can commit.
Mr. Attorney General, don't ever do that again. I am reporting
what again?
What he said. He said on the expectation that he hoped to get some of the funds from a payout. He's been
From
hearing
the, no, you said
involved
from
in
the
hearings.
slush fund, Senator, and that didn't exist when he said that.
This is the fund that the president and all of you have been telegraphing all along that you're going to use to help the president's friends.
Can you point to a
Mr.
single
Attorney General,
telegraph
I
I
have a last
made?
question.
What telegraph did I?
I have a last question for
Okay.
you. Do you know that it is a criminal offense to lie to Congress?
I am very well aware of that.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
NPR reports, quote, soon after his release, Johnson started posting online that he expected to receive restitution money from the Trump administration. So, long before Donald Trump's criminal compensation fund for criminals was announced yesterday, many of those criminals, rightly, it turns out, expected this money from Donald Trump. We will never know, according to the rules of the commission set up by Donald Trump and his acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, who actually applies for and receives any of the money from that fund. There is no limit on who can receive that money. And so we may never know if the child molester who Donald Trump pardoned, Andrew Paul Johnson, gets any money from Donald Trump's commission. Donald Trump, of course, didn't know he was pardoning a child molester when he pardoned Andrew Paul Johnson. And that means that Donald Trump will not know if he is giving money to child molesters through his fund, because that's not the kind of homework Donald Trump does. Donald Trump said today that he's just too busy to explain. He thereby became the first president in history who claimed to be too busy to explain the war that he is waging. Every wartime president prior to Donald Trump has been much busier in their workday and their weekends than Donald Trump. but none of them ever said they were too busy to explain the war that America was waging. That's Donald Trump's unique contribution to the role of commander-in-chief, too busy to explain. He told his absurd lie again today about those mythical 2 or 3 days, the magical 2 or 3 days in which he will negotiate some kind of agreement with Iran to end his war. Donald Trump first started promising those 2 or 3 days primarily to the stock market in the first week of his war. And now, in the 80th day of his war, he's still promising the 2 or 3 days. And what you can know for sure by now is that we are not 2 or 3 days away from the end of Donald Trump's war. And Iran obviously knows that, since Donald Trump has been telling that lie about Iran being ready within 2 or 3 days to agree to a deal with Donald Trump. It's Iran, after all, that Donald Trump is actually lying about when he uses that magic 2 or 3 days formulation. Imagine the Iranian regime sitting there listening to Donald Trump every week saying that they are going to come around in 2 or 3 days. Donald Trump said today that if he had time to explain it to people, everyone would support his war.
Everyone tells me it's unpopular, but I think it's very popular. When they hear that it's having to do with nuclear weapons, weapons that could take out Los Angeles, could take out major cities very quickly. When they hear that, when they're explaining, I'll tell you what, when we explain it to people, I don't really have enough time to explain to people. I'm too busy getting it done.
Of course, Iran does not have those weapons and actually put in writing in an agreement with President Obama that they would never pursue such weapons. Now, here's Donald Trump today not having enough time to explain his war to the American people.
I'm doing a job on the reflecting leg for a fraction of what they paid. Now I've upgraded it I got so into it. I've upgraded it like you wouldn't believe. I'm doing all the walkways outside. I'm doing it properly. But it's a much bigger job. But you see it's happening now. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be waterproof. It's going to be reflecting again.
Yeah. He said the pool is going to be waterproof. Here's more of Donald Trump not having enough time to explain his war to the American people today.
This is a gift to the United States of America. And more than a gift, it's going to be one of the most beautiful buildings that's ever been built in the country or in Washington, D.C. So here's the other facade, see over here. And again, this is taken, these great classical buildings, they're taken out of different parts of the world from very glamorous times. This is Rome. They like the flat roof. Greece likes they call it the triangles, and you see that. This is a porch that looks out over the city. Also, it's developed in such a way that we can have military there, but the entire roof is developed for military. They're very high. They're higher than just about anything else. They have a 360-degree vision of Washington, D.C. They have a massive drone capacity. Not only is it drone-proof, if a drone hits it, it bounces off. It won't have any impact.
No time to explain his war. Today, Donald Trump lost an important vote in the United States Senate on his war. The vote was 50-47 in favor of advancing a war powers resolution to limit Donald Trump's war in Iran. And joining the vote against Donald Trump's war was Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who just lost his re-election primary in Louisiana last weekend. Senator Cassidy's crime against Donald Trump was voting to convict Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial in the United States Senate, where 57 senators, including 7 Republicans, voted to convict Donald Trump and bar him from ever running for president again for his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The attack that Donald Trump did nothing to stop while the attack was going on. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's indictment of Donald Trump for his attempt to overthrow the presidential election accused Donald Trump of a conspiracy against the United States of America. A conspiracy that included Donald Trump's encouragement of the attack on the Capitol, and a conspiracy which now includes a plan for massive payoffs to the people who attacked the Capitol for Donald Trump. The man who's now too busy to explain anything. Leading off our coverage tonight is Democratic Senator Gary Peters of Michigan. He's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, is on the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, and was part of the questioning of Todd Blanche today. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. What can be done by Congress about this situation with this fund that you were part of the questioning of the acting Attorney General today?
Well, Lawrence, you're absolutely right. As you opened up this program, this is just unbelievable that we are in this situation. It is just, I just can't wrap my arms around the fact that we've just seen basically a giveaway of money to folks that are basically political supporters of Donald Trump, that he puts in place an acting attorney general who is basically his private attorney, and then goes to the private attorney and then cuts a deal for nearly $2 billion, basically corruption at the highest level. Certainly Congress has to do something. We've got to try to figure out where this money is coming from, how it's going to be used, what sort of things that we can do. But, you know, Lawrence, as we've talked about before on this program, we're also going to need Republicans that are also outraged by this outrageous corruption that we are seeing play out right in front of our eyes right now. But we have a lot of questions to ask. We asked questions today in the hearing. It was clear that this administration doesn't really want to say who's going to get this money, although we know it's folks, as you mentioned, that were probably involved in the attack on the U.S. Capitol. People who are attacking police officers are actually going to get not only a pardon, but they're going to get a huge payout. This should outrage every American. This has never happened in any presidency. In fact, I don't think we would ever even contemplate that a president would be so brazen in basically doing a cash grab from the taxpayer money and think they could get away with it. So we certainly want to make sure there is outrage from the American people, and then we've got to figure out what action that we can take in Congress. But we're going to have some Republicans are going to join in on that, and I certainly hope some of the folks who are getting fed up with what they're seeing will actually rise up and vote accordingly.
It will be interesting to watch now Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who Donald Trump joined forces with a challenging candidate to drive him into defeat in his Republican primary. It'll be interesting to see his position on this. Senator John Thune, the Republican leader of the Senate, says he doesn't like the fund that Donald Trump has set up. That's a very bad sign for Donald Trump in the Senate.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are a number of folks. I mean, this smells so bad. It's pretty hard not to be outraged by what you're seeing right here. So I certainly appreciate the comments made by Leader Thune. And, you know, Bill Cassidy, I've always known as a very straight shooter. That may be his downfall in this Republican Party, that he is a man of integrity. But the fact that more Republicans are starting to speak out against it is encouraging. But I've also seen that in the past where they talk, but when it comes to an actual vote, they won't actually carry through. But we'll see. We've got to keep bringing this to the attention of the American people because it's pretty clear and obvious that this is outrageous corruption.
Well, there was an actual vote on Donald Trump's war today in the United States Senate, and Donald Trump lost that vote with Senator Cassidy again in this situation, crossing the aisle, now finally fed up with Donald Trump's war.
Yes, no, it was an important vote. Now, there were some members that weren't there today, so we have to have another vote. This is just the first in a series. But it's clear, as you mentioned, Donald Trump does not want to talk about this war because he has failed in his objectives here. And to think that we have a United States president that is presiding over a war, who has caused tremendous chaos in the world economy, a president that is because of his actions in this war of choice is now raising the cost of living for Americans, fuel prices, grocery prices. People are hurting. And then he actually dismisses what people are feeling by saying this is just peanuts. It shouldn't affect them. He has completely lost touch with the challenges that American families are facing right now in our economy. And the image you showed just before I got on this segment of a president, when Americans are paying these prices, are making difficult decisions because energy prices are up, food prices up, farmers are having a hard time ensuring that they're going to even be able to make a profit on their crops, which is going to mean even more problems for Americans. While all of that is happening in the economy, he's talking about a ballroom. He's showing pictures of a ballroom. I can't imagine in history, we've never seen this in history, that a president is engaged in a war, has major global chaos as a result of his actions that are hurting American families in a significant way. And he has time to talk about a ballroom. That's what he has time to talk about. He doesn't have time to talk about the economic challenges that American families are facing or the fact that we are in a war with Iran. He's talking about a ballroom. Talk about someone who's completely out of touch. That's Donald Trump.
Senator Gary Peters, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, as I said, Andrew Weissmann will be joining us. But first, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will join us next. Donald Trump's acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, previously served as Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, a role where he won 34 guilty verdicts for Donald Trump for business fraud. If you watched how bad Todd Blanche was in that criminal trial in Manhattan, as I did, you could not be surprised by this completely inept exchange today in a Senate hearing in which Todd Blanche humiliated himself as a lawyer once again.
Has it ever happened that a sitting president sued his own government for $10 billion and then directed the settlement of the case and the establishment of a payout fund?
Not that I'm aware, but there's a lot of things that President Trump's the first of. No president had been indicted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Correct.
6, 7, 8 times either.
Correct. No president's been indicted.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Whitehouse, there's nothing quite like a Todd Blanche appearance before the Senate.
You just got to love that he leads with, I serve a president who was indicted. Mm-hmm. What a great opener in a hearing about a nearly $2 billion slush fund for cop beaters, announced literally the week after Police Week was celebrated here in Washington to recognize and respect the law enforcement presence that keeps us safe. So very next week, here they are with the cop beaters slush fund. And the other interesting piece about this, Lawrence, is that they managed to delay the news about the other part of the slush fund, this weasel deal that Todd Blanche negotiated for his personal client, the president, which is Trump family tax amnesty. And that news didn't break, even though it looks like it was signed before 8 in the morning that day. The news didn't get out until Blanche had scampered from the committee and didn't have to answer questions about that. But the twofer of a cop beaters slush fund the week after Police Week and Trump family tax amnesty from all audits and tax effects, it is pretty stunning stuff. And they've managed to hide all of that. And what it means for our Republican friends here in the Senate is like, how much Trump junk do you have to carry into this coming election? You've got the billionaire's ballroom. You've got the Iran war. You've got huge costs for diesel, fertilizer, fuel. You've got wicked climate hoax stuff. You've got a boozer running the FBI. I mean, how much do Republicans have to carry for this guy into the election? And frankly, does he want to drag the Republican Party down with him rather than fail alone as a collapsing president?
So on the tax piece, Donald Trump, in effect, pardoned himself for any possible tax crimes from this point backward. Apparently, as I read it, he could be investigated for tax fraud in the future, especially after his presidency, and especially if there's a Democratic-controlled Justice Department after his presidency. He would still be liable for future such investigations.
For new false tax filings and new tax fraud. But from this point back to the beginning of time, Trump, the Trump family, and the Trump corporate organizations all got a free pass, an amnesty for any tax fraud and any further tax audits. Remember, this is from the guy who promised when he first ran to release his taxes, and here we are all these years later, he still hasn't. And what they're almost certain to show is that, like many of the corrupt billionaires that are associated with Trump, he doesn't pay any taxes. He lets that, as Ms. Helmsley famously said, taxes are for the little people.
Well, he said in his first presidential campaign that, of course, he would release his tax returns as soon as the audit was complete. There was no evidence that an audit was going on at the time, but as soon as the audit was complete, well, now we know that the audit is complete as of tonight.
They gotta be complete
That's for
now.
sure.
They're ended.
Yeah, and
We'll
what
see
is the damage?
whether he produces any tax returns.
And this whole thing comes from the notion that Donald Trump was somehow damaged by having some small portion of his tax return released by a contractor who was working for the doing a job for the IRS, wasn't employed by the government. How is it damaging to a president to have tax returns released when every previous president, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, they've all released every page of their tax returns as president?
And when you have a self-dealing situation like this with Trump on both sides of the case, Trump as president, rather Trump as taxpayer versus Trump as president, with Trump as president settling in favor of Trump individually, you've got a huge process problem of where are the independent eyeballs to make a determination as to what the damages were. I mean, you've correctly pointed out that the damages are almost certainly zero, but there was also no independent eyeball put on this to show what the damages might actually have been. The whole thing was just a fix put in by his personal lawyer, this Weasley Blanche character who's running the Department of Justice right now. And as we close into November, Republicans are going to have to answer for this and so much more of the nonstop Trump corruption.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining our coverage tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Andrew Weissman is going to join us in the next segment, where he will actually have some possible solutions to this Trump madness. But first, it is election night with primaries in multiple states, and we're waiting for some important results in Georgia involving Supreme Court elections there. And joining us now is MS Now's Ali Velshi with the latest. Ali, what do we know?
Well, I got some breaking news for you before we get to the Supreme Court. The Associated Press has just declared that Keisha Lance Bottoms will be the Democratic candidate for the Senate. 66% of the vote is in. She's leading with 57.7% against her nearest competitor at 16.6%. You know what's interesting about this is this is for the governor race in Georgia. What's interesting about this is that Keisha Lance Bottoms was the mayor of Atlanta. Fulton County polls are not in yet. They will not come in until about 11:04 this evening. There was a shooting earlier in Fulton County, so they delayed voting for 4 hours. So we will get all of that. You would imagine that the majority of the vote would go over to Keisha Lance Bottoms. So that's why they're able to make that call. However, there's another thing you were just talking about that's interesting. This is a state Supreme Court election in Georgia. There are 2 seats right now. It's nonpartisan, meaning there isn't an R or a D next to the candidate. In one of the races, 70% of the vote is in, and the right-leaning candidate, the conservative candidate, who's the incumbent, Sarah Warren, has been declared the winner there with 61 to 38. The spread is about 340,000 voters. Here's the interesting thing. The other race has not been called yet. Now, let me tell you why that's interesting. This is the conservative candidate who is the incumbent is Charles Bethel. The challenger is Miracle Rankin. At the moment, there's 105,000 votes separating them. Why has this one not been called yet? That's because the same issue. Fulton County, which is the most populous county in the state, and it's most of Atlanta, has not come in yet. That will come in at literally 2 minutes after 11 this evening. That comes in, and there's a sense that there's more than 250,000 votes in Fulton County. That will change and probably erase this lead. The vote percentage will increase dramatically, and it is quite likely that Miracle Rankin will take the lead. So this is a very interesting story here in that it's almost a split ticket on the same position for the Georgia Supreme Court. So where there's been a lot of Donald Trump and his people winning tonight, there may be a very different story in Georgia.
Yeah, that's an important race. Eli Velshi, thank you very much for joining us. And coming up, Andrew Weissmann joins us next, and he has some ideas about how to deal with what Elizabeth Warren is now calling corruption on steroids. If you're one of the people who tried to kill this police officer on January 6th in your attempt to overturn the election for Donald Trump now wants to give you money for trying to kill that police officer. And if you're one of the people who wanted to kill Mike Pence on January 6th, Donald Trump wants to reward you with untaxable cash, which can be given to you secretly at taxpayer expense.
During Police Week, I heard from a number of law enforcement friends who found it appalling that there was the possibility that folks like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, who had assaulted Capitol police officers, could receive multi-million-dollar payouts from this fund. Will you commit that no one who has been convicted of assaulting a police officer will receive a payout from this fund?
So I shared the concerns that apparently members of law enforcement gave to you last week, although none of this was announced last week, so that's surprising. But
they had heard rumors there would be a settlement fund.
Okay, but anybody can apply. The commissioners will set rules, I'm sure. That's not for me to set. That's for the commissioners. And whether an individual, an oath keeper, as you just mentioned, applies for compensation, is anybody in this country can apply.
Joining us now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI General Counsel and an MS Now legal analyst. His important new book, Liar's Kingdom: How to Stop Trump's Deceit and Save America, is available today. Andrew, I want to begin with this one-pager that was added to our understanding of this so-called deal today. As to when it was agreed to isn't clear, but it reads to me as basically Donald Trump pardoning himself for any possible tax crimes that he may have already committed. What else is here? Because this is as strange a so-called legal document as I've ever held in my hands.
It is a very strange document. Part of the reason it's strange is because it's so collusive, because Donald Trump's on both sides of this. In other words, there's no
collusive, meaning he is colluding in effect with himself.
Exactly. Normally, when you have a settlement, it's because you've got adversity and the two sides are taking different positions and they work out an agreement to settle something. But both sides want something different. Here, he has said himself, the president has, that he's on both sides of this. When he was bringing this lawsuit, he said, "I know it seems odd because I'm suing myself." And so this reads, with all deference to Senator Whitehouse, I think he's right, but it goes further than he suggested. This is basically a general release. It goes beyond just saying that he can't be charged with and investigated for tax crimes. So one of the things it says is anything related to any claim that could be made, that had been made or could be made against him, anything that he has alleged or could have been alleged in the Florida tax case. So not just what he claimed, but anything else. And any claims related to lawfare or weaponization. So if you are the 6 members of Congress that you had referenced, or you are James Comey or Letitia James or Jerome Powell, and you think, I have a claim because I think there is selective and vindictive prosecution, I think there is a conspiracy between the president and this Justice Department against me, and frankly, there would be a lot of reason for them to think that. This is a full release of the president, that he cannot be investigated or prosecuted for that. So we have an administration that has said it is doing this sort of grand conspiracy theory related to the CIA former director Brennan, President Obama, on this sort of like grand sort of claim that they were violating rights. Well, this says with respect to Donald Trump, there's no possibility of ever pursuing something like that as to him, because his Justice Department has now given him a general release.
Okay, let's assume that the next elected president of the United States is a Democrat, and that Democratic president appoints a new attorney general. Is this document binding on the next attorney general?
I think it should not be. I think this is one where you would go to court. What would happen is you could go open an investigation, wait for Donald Trump to say, wait, I've got this piece of paper. And what I think the next Attorney General can and should do is say that piece of paper is not worth the paper it is printed on, because it is collusive, there was no consideration, it is really just a fraudulent
And that's
document.
a point you could make to a judge.
Absolutely.
So let's say you actually investigated and say you indicted Donald Trump for some sort of tax fraud, and Donald Trump goes into court. The first move is to wave this paper in front of the judge and say, they can't prosecute me for this. And the prosecutor would say, no, this was a collusive, it was a product of collusion.
Exactly.
And the judge could recognize this as the product of collusion, and therefore you throw it out.
And exactly. And I think in this situation, the set of facts that the next Attorney General would have to support that argument, it seems, almost conclusive that that's what's going on. I mean, as everyone has said, Todd Blanche is not just the former defense lawyer for the president. I want to make sure people understand, if you have represented somebody, you still have a duty of loyalty to that client. When you end your representation of somebody, you then are not free to do anything and
Even
everything.
if you become a prosecutor.
You still have a duty of loyalty. So one of the things that's remarkable is there's reporting that Todd Blanche was told that he could not ethically be taking cases now as then it was the Deputy Attorney General that would conflict with his role as the prior defense lawyer for the president. And that is because of a whole variety of things. But one is you still have a duty of loyalty to former clients. I still have it. I was a defense lawyer. I still have a duty of loyalty to those people. And yet, he then entered into an agreement that is so contrary to the interests of the public fisc, which, by the way, is exactly what the federal judge overseeing the tax case said when she was evaluating this case.
We're going to get a commercial break in here. When we come back, we're going to talk about your new book, Liar's Kingdom, How to Stop Trump's Deceit and Save America. Very relevant to where we are in our coverage tonight. We'll be right back with Andrew Weissmann. In his important new book, Liar's Kingdom, Andrew Weissmann writes, "It is a crime to lie to shareholders. It is a crime to lie to Congress, but it is not a crime to lie to the public. Lies of that sort are not even subject to civil liability or regulation." And Andrew, that's what gives us Donald Trump, among other things.
Yeah, we started by talking about this idea of this weaponization slush fund, and it's predicated on a lie, which is that there was weaponization with respect to prosecuting people who committed crimes that we all saw with our own eyes on January 6th. So this book is about what we can do, and I look at models, looking at what states in the United States do, but also overseas, England, France, Brazil, because it turns out we are really not ahead of the curve, but way behind the curve in terms of countries that have figured out that there actually can be things that are done for politicians who intentionally lie to the public. And if we don't do something on our 250th anniversary, we really are not going to be sustainable. We're seeing so many lies at the core of our political system. So that's what I wrote about.
Yeah, and the founders 250 years ago, imagining George Washington as their first president, elected unanimously in effect, couldn't imagine any of this kind of behavior being something they had to specifically write laws against. And so what you've suggested in the book is a series of new laws that Donald Trump has shown us that we need.
One of the things we have learned, sadly, but maybe helpfully from Trump 1.0 and 2.0, is that norms that we thought everyone was going to respect and were so integral to our country actually working can be just put to one side by a president like Donald Trump. And so we have to figure out ways to build structures, checks and balances that are a lot more resilient than the world we're in now. Because even if for Trump, to disappear tomorrow, we're going to have other politicians who emulate, it's thinking this is a formula for success. I'm going to do the same thing. We have to think our way out of that.
And you've shown us various possibilities of what to put into law, including limits on what politicians could lie about. If they want to lie about taxes and what happens with cutting taxes or raising taxes, that's one thing.
Right.
But lying about elections is actually something that there could be a specific law about.
So England has a law like that. Brazil has a law like that. The president there, Bolsonaro, was prosecuted for an insurrection. He was also barred from holding office because he lied about there being material fraud in the election, which the court system there, after due process in a trial, found was antithetical to the oath of office and what the country stood for. And so he was banned based on their law, and he was then criminally prosecuted for engaging in an insurrection. That is a model that we might want to seriously look at because we have the same type of issue going on here.
And I'm sure people are wondering how the First Amendment interacts with possible limitations on speech. All of that is addressed in Andrew's book. And it's written by a law professor, but it's written for everyone who's never been in a law school class. It is short. It is the beach read. Beach read time is coming up. You can read this one in a weekend. Liar's Kingdom: How to Stop Trump's Deceit and Save America. It's available everywhere now. Andrew, I love this book. I love learning about your parents in this book. There's so much in this book that we don't have time to get to tonight, but I really hope everyone gets this as soon as possible and gets a look at it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Lawrence.
joining us again tonight. We'll be right back. Andrew Weissmann gets tonight's last word, and he's been getting even more of the last word here during the commercial break. He's actually still sitting here beside me, and we're just covering so much more that isn't in the book about his parents and all sorts of things that there's so much more to learn about.